Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll make a start. My name is Colin Meckiff. I work for Eurocontrol at the Experimental Center in Paris, just south of Paris. It's my privilege to be the first one to welcome you to this wonderful location and for this ALIAS 2 conference. A lot of hard work has been done and nervous energy expended in preparation for this, and I'm convinced now that we'll have a really good 2 days. This is an ALIAS conference. ALIAS is a project that's been around for a couple of years now, a few years now actually, and it's part of what we call Work Package E, which is a program run by Eurocontrol on behalf of CESAR that allows that funds projects that are doing long-term and innovative thinking. So this project falls within that definition. And obviously, ALIAS has been looking at legal and liability issues in ATM, especially with regard to new technologies and automation. And that's where we are. Now, ALIAS was in two parts, actually. The first part of the project, if I can simplify things, did two or three things. So first of all, it set out a framework which served as the basis for the rest of the project, looked at the kinds of legal and liability issues that might be necessary to discuss, and set out some vocabulary, some taxonomy, and so on and so forth, which, as I'm not a legal person, I'm an engineer by training, I found that very useful. So first of all, to define the language you're supposed to be speaking. The second thing it did was actually establish a set of cases, examples where legal and liability issues were discussed in transportation, air traffic management and other transportation industries, and other industries outside. So there was a very useful document that goes through a number of different cases that have been critical over recent years to actually set down some examples to act as the basis for the further discussion. And the third thing the ALIAS project did was to develop a methodology and a process to help engineers and legal experts, lawyers, to actually think through with regard to their own technology, to look at their own technology, their own piece of automation, and try and work out the potential legal and liability implications of implementing the technology. That was called the legal case. So that was the first part of ALIAS did that. It finished up with a legal case, a methodology for thinking through liability issues. The project came along with a proposal for a second part, which is called ALIAS 2. So this is kind of the ALIAS 2 conference. And the first thing it proposed to do, ALIAS 2, very important, was to take the methodology developed and apply it to two real-life examples. And that's what we're going to be discussing principally for these 2 days. Two examples of technology automation run through the process to see what comes out of it. The second part, just briefly, of this ALIAS 2 project was to develop tools and training materials to try and disseminate, to try and publicize, explain the process to the general public and to everybody to help its adoption. And Patrizia will talk a little bit about that. It's not on the agenda, but later on today, I think, we'll explain the kinds of things that are going to be available to show to publicize the tool. Now, the two, as you know, the two selected real-world examples are ACAS-X and ARPAS, and there are some of you who are experts in one or the other, or maybe both, I don't know. It's important to understand that the ALIAS project does not have a brief to criticize ACAS-X or to criticize ARPAS. So the ALIAS project is not forming a judgment on these technologies as such. The idea of using ACAS-X and ARPAS was to test the methodology and the process of the legal case tool. Of course, many observations have come out of the studies, and we will spend some time discussing them and the technologies as well. But the principal focus of the studies is the tool and not those technologies. I think that actually the two technologies, the ACAS-X and ARPAS, turned out to be really good choices to exercise, to test the tool and the methodology. I think you'll see, hopefully you'll see that over the next day or so. What became clear to me, though, they've produced a document which is called the report on the report of the test applications, which I think is going to be published, I guess, when you've finished updating it. Reading that, what I found was that the RPAS and ACAS-X, I thought, really good studies, and they're really helpful to exercise the tool, but they really don't cover the whole range of possible automations. You know, there are many different kinds of automation, many different upgrades that are taking place in the air traffic management system. These are two examples, but there are many more. And in fact, what we might do, for those of you who are here after lunch tomorrow, I think we might come back and see, having looked at these two examples, see what are the other kinds of technology, kinds of upgrades that will present different kinds of challenges when going through this kind of liability evaluation. So we might come back to that after lunch tomorrow. So these are great examples, ACAS-X and RPAS, but they really are two examples of many potential ones. I looked back actually at, I think it might have been with the first ALIAS workshop, which was a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now. I gave a welcome speech then actually, and I recall I mentioned difficulties that are faced by transversal activities such as this. And what I mean is a transversal activity, if you have a program that's developing technologies, a transversal activity is what we call something that needs to be applied or considered over the whole range of technologies. And for example, safety is one. Regardless of the technology you're developing, you have to be able to demonstrate that the technology will not harm safety, will not have a negative impact, and so on. It's also true, for example, these days of environment, you have to produce an environmental argument to make sure you're not doing something bad. It's going to be bad for the environment. It's true of things like human performance. We have to make sure human performance is not jeopardized, and so on. The legal case is that kind of thing. It's transversal. It may apply to any or all of the new technologies we're considering. But the problem is, with a transversal activity, it's very difficult to get the engineers and managers to buy into it. No matter how obvious it seems. If you're an engineer, you're developing a piece of software, you're trying to sort out the bugs or whatever, and somebody comes along and says, listen, you have to write an environmental argument for your piece of technology, you'll get a fairly short response generally to that kind of thing. And even in the case of safety, and we've seen it in CESAR, we've had requirements to produce arguments and cases to justify, to make sure no negative impacts. And even with safety, sometimes projects simply don't have the time or whatever the arguments are. So it will also be true of ALIAS, of a legal case. Actually getting engineers and managers to buy in to this kind of consideration is going to be really hard. So, so I wish the ALIAS project luck with that, and obviously what Patrizia will say about the dissemination education packages and the tools and support tools is going to be important in that. I hope that these 2 days we can actually encourage the project to really keep pushing forward in this respect and come up with something that can be taken seriously by the industry. But I think it's going to be a tough battle. So we've got a really good group here, I think, a good size, a good cross-section of the industry. I think we'll have some very good discussions. So I wish you all the best for these 2 days, and I will hand over, without further ado, to Professor Sartor Giovanni for a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. First of all, let me say that it's a pleasure to have here all of you, and I look forward to this, to our conference. Here we are in the European University Institute, which is a big research institution the institute includes 4 departments, law, economics, politics and history, covering social sciences. There are about 500 PhD students, a number of researchers working in different projects, so it's a big community of about 2,000 people, and we are working in nice hills, nice villas on the hills of Florence. This is an example, but there are other villas around. If you have time to have a look at our premises, it will be an interesting experience. So, after having said that, in my presentation I'm going to give you a quick perspective into what we did in the ALIAS project. This is a project that started a few years ago. As Colin said, there is the second edition, and we really hope that we will be able to contribute to give a contribution to the aviation domain, and that we will be able in particular to contribute to developing the dialogue between lawyers on the one hand and technical experts and other stakeholders, which we think could be very fruitful indeed. So moving on. So ALIAS project, as we said, started a few years ago, and is now moving towards this completion that will be this summer. We have the project has delivered some products that are now being finalized. The legal case is our methodology for proactively addressing legal issues pertaining to new technologies. Then there is the ALIAS network, digital library of resources, and the conference. We are also developing a software that will support the process of the legal case, and a very preliminary version, aspects of a very preliminary version of the software are going to be presented later during these days. I go quickly since Colin already said most of the things that I was going to say. So the focus is on automation and the legal implication of automation. The projects includes 2 partners, the European University Institute, which is hosting this conference, and the Blue, a company which has been working for many years in many projects pertaining to aviation. So what is the second part of the project, the second ALIAS 2? ALIAS 2 has the purpose of developing, consolidating the legal case, applying it and so validating it, extending the networking session, and organizing also training and coaching on the legal case. So it builds upon the outcome on the first ALIAS project. What are the outcomes of the ALIAS project? I already mentioned that there is the legal case, there is the library, there is the network, and the conference. So let us start with the legal case. Is a new methodology to address legal issues pertaining to automation during the design process. The idea is that it is better to prevent legal issues rather than to face them after the problem has already happened. So the legal case includes a standardized process to identify legal liability in a structured way, so that this problem can be addressed either through technological fixes or through legal arrangement, and then to provide a variety of supporting tools, tables, flow diagrams, maps, tables and reports, which have a double purpose. On the one hand, to provide the outcome, but also to facilitate the communication during the process between technical and legal experts. So 4 steps in the legal case. First, there is the need of understanding the ATM concept that is going to be addressed, or the new technology. we did 2 test applications, one on RPIS and the other on ACA6, and they are going to be the focus of this conference. Then to identify the possible issues related to this concept of technology, engage in legal analysis, identify what risks, after we have identified what are the possible risks, determine what will be the legal consequences with that, who is going to be considered liable, accountable for the failure we are considering, and finally collecting the results of the process and presenting them in an appropriate way. We had 2 test applications of the legal case. As we said, one on ACA6 and the other on RPIS. And the outcome of this test application would be some substantial results, possibly useful, already useful for those working on these technologies. We had some contacts which seems to me were quite fruitful, in particular with the team that is working on ACA6. And also the main objective is to extract from these test applications inputs for consolidating, improving the legal case, and so that it can achieve a stable condition as a product ready for being used also outside of the ALIAS project. So we had these 2 test applications with relevant stakeholders. You're going to learn about that in the following. And then we had some interviews on the methodology and of the outcome of the legal case. In these 2 test cases, we selected experts, some of which are here, in order to validate the methodology, to see with them whether we are on the right track. I will go quickly over these slides. So the ALIAS network is a community, a virtual community built around our website, where a debate involving more than 160 experts has been taking place in the last years. You can have access to this debate by on various themes by accessing the ALIAS website. We can provide you, there you have the link, and you can register and be involved in the discussion. You can also find, always through the same link, also the ALIAS Digital Library, which is a collection of resources on human factors, legal resources, that can provide information and some support also for developing, for applying the legal case. Finally, there is the conference. We had some previous conference. We were very happy of that, successful events, and I hope, strongly hope that also this conference will be a success, useful for all of us. There is a new development. I just invented that name. The name is not official. So the ALIAS legal software. There is a software tool. Possible name will be Alex, but this is going to be discussed. It's just an idea this morning before drinking the coffee. So maybe after having some brain stimulation, this name is going to be revised. But the idea is that in order to support the legal case process, it's necessary to have also some software, so that the software may guide and facilitate the people involved in the legal case, including functions such as scenario management, navigation on maps, but also automated inference to see what will be the liability implication of particular scenarios having certain kind of features, reporting, and other functions still being considered. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to repeat my welcome at the UI. I hope and also believe that this conference will be a challenging and interesting experience for all of us. And if you have some time, have a look in Florence, and in particular at the infrastructure, the buildings of the UI, which are beautiful also from the architectural point of view, besides that hosting this big, large research community. Thank you very much again.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ALIAS conference. What I would like to present is just the program for the 2 days of the conference. So today in the morning we are going to have a session, the introductory session on automation and innovation in aviation. So we will present different perspectives from different actors and stakeholders to how the introduction of new automation in aviation will change the domain and will also have legal consequences, in particular for liability. We are going to have Anthony Smoker from IFATCA, Luca Falessi from the Italian CAA, ENAC, and then we're going to have Professor Elmar Giemulla giving a broad overview of emerging issues in aviation law and aviation security law. After the coffee break, we are going to have a presentation from the insurance perspective, and then myself and Luca Savo, we are going to present some results, some products of the ALIAS project, in particular the legal case itself. So we are going to provide you an overview of how the methodology is working. After the lunch in the afternoon, we are going to focus on the first of the two technologies. So we are going to dedicate the afternoon to RPS. And after a first panel in which Alfredo Roma will moderate a discussion on the regulatory framework, the operational usage, and the industrial and business models of RPAS, we are going to have a presentation of how we applied the legal case methodology to RPIS. So we are going to present a bit of our test application and some results we obtained from the application. Then we are going to involve in the discussion some of the participants in our user group, because as you will see, the legal case methodology is, of course, a methodology that should be in some ways which application should be in some ways coordinated by lawyers, but of course not only lawyers can complete the application of the methodology, but also engineers, experts on insurance, safety expert, human performance experts should be involved, and we will involve some of the participants on the RPAS user group. And finally, we are going to have another panel in which some judges are going to give their perspective on the introduction of RPIS. Tonight, we are going to have the social dinner at Ristorante OBK, which is located on the center of Florence. Tomorrow we are going instead to focus on collision avoidance systems, and in the same way we are going first of all to introduce the legal issues of collision avoidance systems with Professor Giemulla, and we are going also to discuss the technical perspective with Ken Carpenter, and then we are going to focus on our test application of ACAS-X. So we are going to present again the application of the methodology, this time on ACAS-X. And then we are going to have a panel in which we will discuss the results and how we obtained it, and some reflections together with the user group that supported us in the application of in the test application for the legal case to ACAS-X. And then again we are going to have another panel with judges presenting again their perspective. In the afternoon, we are going to have a final round table on the ITM need for legal research in CESAR, and then we're going to have the conclusions. After a final coffee break, we will leave the space open for networking activities. And few other things concerning logistics. Tonight we are going to have a bus going from the hotel, from Villa La Stella, in which many of you are hosted, to the restaurant, starting from the hotel, moving from the hotel at 19:40. And then we have another bus from the restaurant to the hotel, back to the hotel, at 10:30 p.m. And tomorrow morning we have another bus going from the hotel, like today, like this morning, here to the conference at 8:45. Another thing is that all the presentations and other materials, such as papers or legal cases, or etc., that you provided to us, will be made available on our social networks, in particular SlideShare and YouTube for video recordings. Of course, in order to do this, we need your consent. So I invite you to fill, if you agree, the informed consent form that you should have in your folder, and bring it back to the registration desk. That's all from my side for the moment, and let's start with the first session.